I'm just going to hand over to Mr. Grumpy and let him explain it all for himself now. So thanks very much, Andy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the invite to come and talk on this. I've really enjoyed being part of these weekly events, and something that strikes me is that, having been involved in these and sitting in on your guide module, is that a lot of what we do when we lead and guide people is not always to do with teaching them how to paddle, teaching them to cook and look after a tent and all that kind of thing. We're dealing with whole people, and we can have quite an effect on those people in the time that they're with us. So we meet people where they are, and we find out where they want to go, and we help them make some of that journey. And I think we leave memories and capabilities with them long beyond the trips that we're involved with them for. So I'm going to use slides. I apologize. I have tried to make them as usable as possible, but I'm going to share my screen, and it just it allows me to not end up waffling on too much. That's not really going to happen. It will be a waffle on. So helping leaders and guides bring out the best in people. It's something I've been thinking about for many years, and I went on a workshop with a lass called Kate O'Brien about 5 years ago, and that was on positive psychology, and it brought so many things together that I'd been thinking about. And I've had a lifetime of being grumpy, so it was about time I started thinking about being positive instead. But it was a really good workshop, and it made sense of why I'd thought a particularly primary school teacher that we'd appointed when I was a governor was so good. She was a real positive force in the classroom. She would walk into the room, look around the classroom and wait for somebody to sit and be quiet and look back at her, and she would then point at them and say, "Thank you, Daniel. You're ready to learn. I can see that just by the way you've set yourself up." So she never ever walked into a classroom and said shush. And everything she framed about the way she worked with groups was that positive approach to things, which was it was something wonderful to watch. So first thing I'm going to do tonight is to offer you something. Offer you something to think about. I'm going to offer you a pill, something that we've been working on in the labs, probably in Oughton. Oh, and there it is. It's a positiveness pill. And what I want you to think about is whether you're going to swallow this. So this pill can give you just positive experiences for the rest of your life. And I want to know, would you take it? Now, if you're on Zoom, you can probably put a thumbs up, or you could type something into the chat box, because I know there's a chat box there. Are we going to take this pill? Maybe, if the answer to that is no, can you click a few words into the chat box to say why you wouldn't take it? Or if you would take it, put some words in there. We don't need to worry about the law because this is a hypothetical pill. It's not a class one. The chat box is still empty, people. I'm only going to talk to you if you talk back. Yes, somebody, Sue said yes. Lisa, so you need some non-positive. Okay, well, we've got people using their drawing tools as well. Thank you, Mark Young. John, I like that. without knowing bad, you can't appreciate good. Maybe without good, you can't appreciate bad either. But yeah, I like the fact that your orange juice is still well above the halfway line. You know, the one that it's the optimist that says my glass is always half full. It's the pessimist that says it's half empty. Do you know what the engineer says? He says it's twice the size it needs to be. Okay, so there's a mix of answers, but I think people are sort of picking up a little bit of where I'm going with this. You've got mountains and valleys, and without mountains and valleys, the landscape looks pretty bleak and pretty flat. So we need a mix of mountains and valleys. Looking at the valley from the top of the mountain, everything looks quite small and ordered and tidy. It's only when we're down in the valley that it feels as if it's not quite so well ordered and not quite so tidy. But as we climb up the mountain and get to the top, we get a different view of things. So I would like to suggest that it's hard to appreciate one without the other. And our life journey is this kind of trek from the highs of mountains to the lows of valleys. But what we need to be able to do is when we're on those mountain tops looking down is to kind of capture that feeling. And we almost need to, thinking about the expeditions we lead, there's quite often that euphoria of being on an expedition, of being in a special place, of being somewhere, having done something special for yourself. And we almost need to be able to bottle that for the times in life when it's needed, so that we can fall back onto that. So I would suggest that, as John said, you know, you need a mix of mountains and valleys in order to appreciate where you are at any given time. And that's in a physical expedition sense, but it's also in a mental sense as well. So there's two types of well-being that can be explained. Hedonic, which is pleasure in the moment. It's quite short-lived and very self-focused. It's nearly Easter, and that scoffing a Cadbury's cream egg in one is definitely one of those hedonic experiences. For a few minutes, you feel absolutely terrific, and then you wish you hadn't done it. But for that moment, that gratification that comes with those quick fixes at the time is fantastic. But that's not the kind of quick fixes that we get when we're on expeditions. So the other type of well-being is eudaimonic, which is about fulfilling your potential, personal growth, doing something worthwhile, making the effort. Hard-won experiences. So I put up a post about doing this on Facebook, and completely unprompted, I promise I didn't set this lass up to put the comment up that she did, but the girl that sat in the back of that tandem kayak, about that year was the year that she makes this reference to. That's Natalie, and I think she was about 14. And that's what she put up on the post I'd put up about doing this chat tonight. I'll give you a minute to read it. So I would say that was a very eudaimonic comment. And what you can do is, if you pick out of that some little bits of what she said, there's a real clue to how that kind of experience lives on and lasts. And it's those kind of experiences that we can give people when we're taking them on trips and expeditions. And we need to be conscious of that. We need to work on that. Those trips and expeditions can sometimes be the times when people make quite significant changes in their resolution and being. And we can help that. We can definitely help that. And most of what I want to talk about tonight is the kind of language that we use when we're talking to people, and how, if we can be mindful of getting that into a positive state when we use it, it will have quite a big impact on people. For me, with coaching and leading, the words I use paint pictures. And I've worked really hard with a lot of my coaching stock phrases to make sure they paint as accurate a picture of what I want people to achieve as I can, so it's a clear picture. So we will talk quite a bit about the sort of language we use. But it's also chemistry. Now, this slide probably is a bit small for you to read, but there's the 4 toxins that actually act in our brain to do something that give us that short sugar rush feeling of a Cadbury's cream egg, or that give us that satisfied feeling at the end of a cross-country run. For the cross-country run bit, I've done research, I've talked to other people about that. It's far easier than doing a cross-country run. I don't do that. But they tell me there's a long-lasting effect to it. So there is some chemistry involved, and those chemical receptors give out the buzzes that runners crave from their running, that we enjoy from the trips we do, we enjoy from the people that we meet, because very soon we'll be able to meet people again. So I'm moving on from that. How can we start to get that chemistry working for people? There are, for me, if I was doing something like this evening's chat in a room, as people arrived, I gave out cards with each of these questions on and asked them to find somebody, ask the question of them. Importantly, listen to the answer they give, and then listen to the question they'd got and give your answer, swap cards and go and find somebody else. So it kind of builds at the beginning of an evening to get people introduced to each other, but it's also doing something else. These questions are all facing in one particular way. Now I'm going to try something, and whether this works or not, we'll see in a minute. But in the chat box, where at the bottom it says "to everyone," I would like you to click on that and choose the next name down the list to yourself and select that, so that you're sending a message to one other person. And I would like you to choose one of those questions from the list and ask that question of the other person. So you're going to have quite a lot to do. You're going to have 3 tasks. Well, 4 if you include choosing the person next on the list. Ask a question of that person. Answer the question to that person. Sorry, answer the question that somebody else has asked you, and then read the answer to the question you asked somebody else. If you're last on the list, go up to the top. Can you give me a thumbs up, those that I can see on screen? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Thank you, John, Mark. So you're going to go to the chat box, and where it says in blue on mine, it says "to everyone." If you click on the down arrow, you can scroll down to find your name. and then look at the person underneath your name and send a message to them. Oh, hello, Ushma. So choose the person next down on the list and send them one of those questions to answer. Give you a few minutes to do that. If you can manage that, that's fantastic. Otherwise, just have a look at that list of questions and answer them for yourself. Just think about how they would set you up for working with that person, with that group. Okay, Karis, so just choose a random person. Yeah, Noddy, I don't think it's just comedians that feel that. Is that working for anybody, or should we move on? It's working, okay, okay. I'm only asking because nobody's asked me a question. Well, hello, Mr. Smith. Just managed to find some pictures of people. Hi, Noddy. Cat. Okay, so I can see loads of people now. If you put your thumbs up if you've done that, if you're happy to move on. If you're not yet ready. Yeah, okay. Well, I've got loads of questions now. Thank you. I'm not going to answer them, but thank you for thinking of me. Okay, so I'm suggesting that if we have a bank of questions that point positive to start any interaction with, that's a really good thing to get people thinking in that direction to start with. Doing that kind of round robin. So I'm going to look at some positive statements that we make, and these are kind of around what we do in the outdoors. So I've filled in the first one. I think most people are dialed into this, that when we're on the water, we point positive. So we point at the good jet of water to go down. We don't say, watch out for that rock, because the minute we do that, it is science, it turns that rock magnetic. The minute you say, don't go over there, you're fishing them out the trees straight away. So the idea that we always point positive when we're making comments is probably dialed in with pointing to the right bit of the water. But how about those other comments? How often do you use those comments when you're out boating? And can you think of what the question marks might be replaced with if, as I suggest, we don't use the comments that are there? if you're about to shoot a weir and the last thing I say to you is, whatever you do, don't grab the gunnels, what's going to be ringing in your ears as you go over that weir? And the beauty of gunnels is that they amplify anything that happens to the boat. So instead of that, if you say, keep your hands on the paddle. Hello, Xavier. If you say, keep your hands on the paddle, that's the bit they're going to be thinking about as they go over. And that gives them a brace. And even better, if you've told them which side of the boat to have the paddle when they're going over sidewards, chances are they might even stay in the boat over it as well. So I think it makes a huge difference if we've thought about the kind of things we're going to say to people. Kids don't think about drowning until you tell them the buoyancy aid's going to stop that happening. Again, keeping them afloat is what they want to hear. The last one, calm down and smile. I can take you back to my level 2 kayak assessment on Rutland Water. And I was on lead, and it was Boggett who was doing the assessing. And he's a bit of a meanie. And while it was on my lead, he went out a bit further, capsized, and was thrashing around like a good one next to his kayak. And as I paddled over to him, I was thinking, well, he's told me not to say don't panic. But I'm not quite sure what to say to him, because my instinct was I wanted to tell him to stop panicking. And as I was trying to think what else I could say to him that wasn't don't panic, I got fatally too near to him, and he managed to grab the front of my kayak very stealthily, as if he'd done it many times before, and flipped my kayak over as well. So I was then the leader in the water with a panicking student. So I learned quite quickly that I needed to have something to say other than don't panic to get people in the water calm enough for me to be able to approach them and sort them out. Calm down and smile, put your hands in the water, works just as well. So thinking about the language that we use, the positive statements we make, is really useful. Any comments on that? Relax and smile. Thank you, Kat. Keep paddling helps. Yes, it does. Okay. Somebody has capsized, somebody has taken a bit of a fall on a rope. What question do we instinctively ask? Somebody's just capsized. What do we instinctively ask? Am I right? So it's a bit like swallowing a mouthful of cider. Cider was my nemesis when I was 14, still is. So you swallow it and you get that horrible taste as it goes down, and then you spit it back out and you get the horrible taste as it comes back out as well. So not only have you capsized, but your instructor's getting you to relive that, all the things that went wrong, you're now thinking about. Is that right? We can call that a judger statement. We are encouraging them to judge what they've just done. And that's not going to look very pretty. So we could go neutral. We could say, what happened there? Brilliant. That's not judging, is it? However, they're wet, spitting fish out, a little bit embarrassed. They'll probably choose to judge. They'll say they did something wrong. They leaned over too far. They lost the balance. The paddle was at the wrong angle. They'll turn it into a judger if we give them the chance. So we need to try and give them a way of looking at it positively. So what would you do different to avoid that? And at that point, they start recounting all the things that you've told them to keep themselves the right way up. Keep your head above your hips, keep your paddle in your hands, all the things that help them not capsize, so that that experience turns into a learning experience, not a judging experience. Now, there's an American lass that wrote a book called Change Your Questions, Change Your Life. Nicely understated, like all Americans. And to save you having to read that book, I'll show you the page out of it that's worth the book. And it's that, and I hope that's big enough for you to see. And if you read these phrases with an American twang, it just helps to put that comedic value on it. But what she's saying is not comedy. It is actually gold. And as an expedition leader, I'll shut up and let you read it. Give me some thumbs up when you've got through it. Sam, are you struggling to read that? Dave, how big is it? It's all right, is it? Yeah. Thank you, Marty. I'm that big. Good.
Yeah, it's okay, but I have got a 22-inch monitor, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I got up to a 27-inch monitor before I went to the opticians. So yes, you can hear the American accent in it, but basically she sort of woke up in the morning and said that the question she was asking herself was, why aren't I in a relationship? Why can't I get a job? Why does nobody want to be with me? And it wasn't until she started asking questions like, what do I need to do today to move towards getting a job, that she actually started to make some progress. So there's always time to change, and that time change is the nugget when we can actually have quite an impact with people. If we can help them move their statements to positive, to learner statements rather than judger statements, then we can have quite an impact with the people that we work with, I would suggest. Can you think of some examples, and you might have started doing this when we were looking at those 4 statements, think of some examples of where maybe you've been guilty of being that judger, of leading people into making judgments rather than learning responses to things that have happened. If anybody wants to come off mute and talk, that would be wonderful.
Andy.
Yeah.
Steve here. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think early on in my instructional career, it's very easy to go down that route because you're kind of looking for answers straight away, and you want something immediate, and they're easy go-to things. Well, what happened? What did you do wrong, or what did I do wrong? So yeah, and it's when you have that experience that you kind of step back and you go, hang on a second, right? How else can we look at it? So yeah, early on in people's careers, I think this is definitely the go-to.
Yeah, that's a really good point to make. Steve Rolnick uses the phrase deficit detective, and I think in our early instructing and guiding careers, we tend to be looking at what people are doing wrong in order to be able to correct it for them, rather than asking them to say what they want to improve on.
Hi, Andy, it's Mike.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny because I deliberately think about this when I'm coaching, but I've noticed it mostly recently when I'm with my kids. And I'm saying, oh, what the hell did you do that for? That's a stupid thing to do. So maybe I need to take this philosophy more to my kids and not out of my coaching world.
It's really funny you should say that. I'm managing to relive all my mistakes now. It's called grandparenthood. So I've now got a grandson who is getting a much better deal out of me than any of my 3 daughters did. And I've noticed it too, Mike. Yeah, that's a good one. Anybody else?
Yeah, sorry. I find with the judger, I do the judging on myself more than other people, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
on previous like skill courses that I've attended, generally speaking, Sam will say to the instructor, just give her a minute. And then I'll go off and who was that tennis player who like throws his tennis racket at the floor because he's missed or he's lost?
You'll find out later on this evening.
Oh, there we are then. So that's essentially me on myself. And half the time it's like, well, how do I even enjoy these activities I do when I give myself such a hard time? So I don't do it to others, but I definitely do it to myself.
And that's interesting because that page I've just shown you out of the book, that was her account of herself, of her digging herself out of a hole by changing the question she asked herself. But I think we can help people make that switch in names by making sure we use the learner statements with people as much as we can. Grand. So just the last bit on that is focus on what's strong, not what's wrong. A really nice mantra to grab hold of. Focus on what's strong rather than what's wrong. For ourselves and the groups we work with. So I've put a break in there because I thought I'd been talking by now. Dave, have you noticed any questions that have gone unanswered?
No, nothing yet.
No, nothing yet. I think you've been asking most of the questions as you go along. But has anybody got a question? There's not very many of us. So if you just want to sort of raise your hand, wave at me or something, and then unmute, that'd be cool. Simon, you've always got a question.
I noticed that somebody's put in about Carol Dweck's mindset model. Again, not only are you going to get John McEnroe, you're going to get mindsets as well, and they probably come at the same time. Anybody, is that somebody is Simon waving his hand or not?
I was whooping, Andy, whooping with joy.
Whooping, okay. That's good, I like that.
Okay, don't take this positivity too far, Simon.
No,
Right, don't peak too early.
Sorry, I'll go back to being grumpy.
Here we go then, mindsets. Carol Dweck, who I can never pronounce, suggests that there are 2 extremes to mindsets. I don't like having just 2 boxes to put everybody into because it means you have to have very big boxes, but probably you have boxes at both ends of a long line of boxes, and at one end is a person with a fixed mindset. They tend to think they're born with what they've got and that they can't make much difference. Doesn't mean they can't do things. Certainly to start with, they can be quite successful. The advantage of being somebody with a growth mindset is that there's a belief in being able to develop. Talent is improved with hard work. It's not God-given, innate, what you're born with. It can be worked on. The 10,000 hours makes you an athlete. So this cycle, if it runs around in the red as a fixed mindset, faced with a new challenge, I can't do this, I won't try because I might look daft, I'm useless, I never want to try it again, this is impossible. It's that kind of circle of things. Taking groups out on the river, we do run down a rapid. At the bottom of it, you say to the group, that was fantastic, everybody got down. Did you actually get the best line? Was there a better line that you could have got? Let's go back up to the top and try it again. And at that point, you'll get that split between those people who work with a growth mindset and those that have got fixed. The ones with the fixed mindset will celebrate the fact that they've done it and they're still the right way up in the boat. And let's move on and do something else now because we've done that, and I don't want to risk going and doing it again and maybe not getting away with it this time. People with the growth mindset will be delighted at the chance to go and have another go at it. Having had a go at it, they will have seen possibilities for doing something differently and expanding their skills on that particular piece of water. And that's the reason why we need to try and help people towards a growth mindset. And there are things we can do to ease people away from that fixed mindset. So we're looking at the reactions they have to these half a dozen different episodes. So what do they do in the face of a challenge? Back away from, embrace it. People with a growth mindset will be prepared to put lots of effort into it. If you've got a fixed mindset and it's a new climbing wall and you've not done this one before, you get up 2/3 of the way and it is a really effortful one. You have a couple of goes at it and slip and think, no, I'm not going to try that again because it's going to make me look awful. I'll come down, I'll do one I can already do. Whereas somebody with a growth mindset will just spend hours and hours and hours trying to make that crossing. That is quite difficult to read, I appreciate, on a small screen, but it's worth going away and looking for that diagram. It's readily available under growth mindset on Google, and that gives some of those pointers for what people will do given those set of challenges. So what can we do to promote a growth mindset? And it's about the kind of feedback we give and the conversations we have with them. As you can see in the blue, you must be very clever. Sounds like a compliment, sounds like something really positive, but actually they've got a good result in this test. That must be because they're really clever. The next test, they don't get a good result. Does that mean their level of cleverness has now been surpassed and they're not going to be able to do anymore? You've not given them any tools to improve with. If your comment to their results is you've studied really hard for that exam, that's something they can carry on doing. They can study hard for the next exam. They're not just clever or just thick. They've got a strategy to move towards keeping up with the improvement they need to make. And again, with the climber, you're a natural climber, and I'm guilty of saying that to people. Definitely. And it doesn't give them anything to work with. You were really focused on that climb. I could see you looking for somewhere to reach for. So just thinking about the compliments we pay people, there is a wealth of difference between giving praise and giving affirmation. And if we get time later on, I'll certainly give you a link for something I'm working on as the differences between praise and affirmation. So let's have a couple of people to put a face to these two different sides of growth mindset. I'm actually going to show you a couple of short bits of film. The first one is our friend Mr. McEnroe, who was a very young boy when this film was when he played this tennis match. So I'm just going to swap my screen and let you have a look at this. Yeah, if only you wouldn't go on about it. So there's a lad that was fairly averagely successful at one sport at school, so gave up and went and did another one, which was tennis. And he was quite promising. So they accommodated him. They told him how good he was. He had strops and they accommodated him and told him how good he was. And he kept going and going and going and ended up at Wimbledon at a very, very early age. And until he was beaten, he did really well. The minute he came up against somebody who could play better than him, he had no strategy to get better. And that's that sort of being very simplistic about it. That sort of outbreak is what sort of came of that. So I'll show you somebody else, another athlete.
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed.
I never feel that I'm at my best. I feel I still have room to improve. I still set goals for myself to strive for. I'm never complacent with what I've achieved. Even though it's been very successful for me, I still feel I have a lot to prove, not just as a player, but as a person, as a father, to some extent.
That was quite a long interview, and that's just a short snippet of it, but you can see Michael Jordan's different approach to his capabilities and his ability to play the game. So we need to encourage, where we can, the move towards a growth mindset. And we can do it if we, rather than give simplistic praise, we move towards affirmation. It really gives people tools to get better. It means we have to think more about what we say, but that's no bad thing. So I'll just give a quick look at this PDF that I've got, but I'm quite willing to, well, I'll put the link in so that people can have a look at it for themselves. But that's the top half of it. And it was a workshop I did on with Stephen Rolnick, and they were talking about the difference between praise and affirmation and how much more powerful giving affirmation can be. So the praise side is actually pretty short, and there's a lot more on the affirmation side of that. Another quote was Miles Davis was being complimented on the sound he got out of a trumpet. A long time to sound like myself is what it's taken, is what he said. And I have quite often get the comment when I'm in a canoe that I make it look very easy. And my stock answer to that is I've worked really hard to make it look that easy. And that is that kind of statement that you can give to others. That's what you need to do. You need to work hard to make it look that easy. So yeah, Michael Jordan acknowledges where his learning came from, and it came from the mistakes he made. It came from the times he failed rather than just hoping he always succeeded. If you know your failures, you know where your strengths need to come from. Okay, so is that Simon that's put up the TED Talk? That's one. That's not one I've seen. There's one that the South African paddler who did the Zambezi, Steve, I can't remember offhand. Can't remember his name now. He did a really good TED Talk on risk, but it was similar. Further place a positive emotion. So if we are out with groups having a good time, then that's when we can bottle that euphoria for them, help them to reference their state of being at the time they are successful and euphoric about achieving something. So really important part of working with Duke of Edinburgh groups is to make sure that you help them bottle the euphoria of working together as a team, achieving their aim and getting their expedition done. It's the kind of bottled condiment that builds their resilience in life. And we have a real responsibility with all of our groups, youngsters and adults, to help them frame the experiences they have to take away and use when they need them later. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Andy, can I jump in with a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
The mindset reaction. Do you think that age and gender has a particular influence on this?
I think schools have an influence on it. I think people of all ages have displayed both fixed and growth mindsets. I think the pressure of on youngsters these days, I think, tends to steer them too easily towards a fixed mindset, not wanting to show out as unsuccessful. And actually, experience comes from being unsuccessful. What we learn from are the things that we do wrong. And if you as a child are so concerned and nervous about being seen to do things wrong, then that's limiting your ability to learn. And maybe in the different environment that we take kids into, that's the time to let them make mistakes. Safely, but make mistakes and learn from them. And at least go away knowing it's okay to make mistakes. Because that's what closes down learning, growth learning.
There's that old statement, isn't there? If you haven't made a mistake, then you've never made anything.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, learn from life's experiences. Simon's making a comment now. I've got one last slide before we can take some further questions, just to see if you've been listening. It's a little crossword. Woohoo! How good's that? Those of you that know where the annotation tools are for Zoom might like to fill that in.
You're not sharing your screen, Andy.
Oh, that would help, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I'd done so well up until then. I think I'd done so well up until then. And in that case, what I will do before you get to do that one, I'll take you back to that one because you didn't see that either, did you? I've used that and it works really well. Or it works really well. It would appear at the time. I've not stood next to them at the times when they've unbottled that, but I think it will be there to unbottle. So now the crossword. Have we filled that in? There's the Blue Peter version. And then for the last 2 minutes, I'm going to use you lot as guinea pigs, if that's all right. I've got something called a Jamboard, which to my dismay is not made out of strawberries. But you should be, when I put it up on the screen, you should be able to move stuff around. So I'll stop sharing one thing and have a go at sharing this instead. Can you see that? And would somebody like to have a go at moving one of those post-its? See if it works. Not working? Okay, so it needs to be, I'll put the link into chat. See if that works. So if you open the link in a browser window, that should link back to the one that's on screen.
Andy, mine says that it's sent an email letting requesting access.
Yeah, it's one for another time, I think. So I need to have another look at how that sets itself up. So I have got all the emails asking for access to it. So I need to work out a way of getting them. It was just a post-it note exercise to move statements from into whether they were fixed mindset statements or growth mindset statements. So I'll finish by asking if there's any questions.
Not in the chat.
There's no questions that have come out in the chat, but if anybody's got any questions, just jump in.
In that case, I'll see if I can sort the...
Oh, Steve put his hand up.
Oh, Steve's got a question, or
Okay.
either that, or he wants the toilet.
Yeah, Andy, I've got a question. You mentioned working with your DOV youngsters.
Yeah.
Do you have that discussion with them about the mindset theories and fixed and growth mindsets, or is it just sort of a continual development as you go through, or is it something you purposely like them to try and get a grasp of some kind of understanding, so that as you move forward with your DOV expedition, that they can draw back what you're referencing at that given point back to what you may have built up prior? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I wouldn't go showing them those diagrams of fixed growth mindsets, but I certainly talk to them about challenging themselves in ways that allows growth. There's a whole load of conversations that can be had during a Duke of Edinburgh expedition. All the 100-mile Canoe Test is also where it happens no end. For me, my first career in life was actually a residential social worker with kids. And I've done lots of other things since then, but I've always worked with youth. And once kids get past the age of about 10 or 11, the attitude tends to slide in and get in the way of good communication with adults for most of the time. They get so used to dealing with teachers and feeling that they're finding their way as adults themselves. The window to work with them is quite often in the outdoors. You've got a completely neutral platform. In fact, no, it's not even neutral. It's loaded towards you because you know the way out. They don't, and that's one of the beauties, one of the attractions of working with in the outdoors is with youngsters is the fact that they are open to being talked to. You get that opportunity to actually talk to them about things that matter.
Right. Okay.
So we have all kinds of conversations on DOV expeditions, and yes, things about growth mindsets being positive. We also look at via strengths. There's a set of 24 leadership strengths or being strengths divided into various categories, and I will. So one of the things I do at the end of each Duke of Edinburgh expedition is give the teams a list of roles that people could have had during the expedition. So camp de chef, first up in the morning, organised, camp agony aunt, best dressed. So there's a whole range of identities. Some of them are quite frivolous, but actually some of them matter. So who was it that took the stress? Who was it that that was that organised person that got up first. Who was it that did the organising? So we get to just have a think about who it was in our groups that did those things, and that's quite a good debriefing session at the end of an expedition.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, I'd just like to thank you, Andy. That was a great chat, and really appreciate that. And anybody that hasn't done a guide module with me, if you do the customer experience module, this will be one of the paddle chats that I signpost you to watch. It's really useful. Thank you.
And just before we finish, can I thank Dave and Sarah on behalf of the paddle chat community for putting on these events and advertising your courses so eloquently. But seriously, for making the effort to make this community of learning happen. It does take a lot of work to do that sort of thing, and it's very much appreciated from the people in the room, I think.